Departure gates at Dublin Airport, a very different sight to what we saw at the weekend. As you can see behind me, there's literally no one going through at the moment, no queues, but as we know, it was all so very different yesterday. And for more on this, I'm joined by the DAA's Media Relations Manager, Graeme Mulqueen. Graeme, thank you for joining us on the Tonight Show tonight. When we look at the scenes behind us, there are no queues, yet we've had 45,000 passengers going through the airport today, some 50,000 yesterday. So what's the difference and where did it all go so wrong?
Well, we're here tonight at the end of what has been another very busy day. Thankfully, today has gone much more smoothly than we saw at the weekend. We slipped up yesterday. We had a major blip. We've been doing very well since the end of March when we encountered our last blip. We didn't have enough staff on yesterday to cope with the numbers. That's on us. We apologise unreservedly to any passenger who was affected yesterday. We're in the process now of trying to refund any passenger who was put out of pocket yesterday by the experience. That will include things like sandwiches and hotels that they may have had to buy or book as a result of missing their flight. So that process is ongoing. We're also looking now at how we rectify the situation to make sure that what we saw yesterday doesn't happen again.
What was it down to, Graeme? Was it down to staff calling in sick at the last minute? What happened?
Quite simply, at the moment, we're an airport, like airports all over Europe. We're trying to build back post-COVID. For the past 2 years, we had no passengers, so we're building back from that. At the moment, passenger numbers are hitting around 95% of what we would have seen in 2019. That was a record year for us. But the staffing levels on security, probably around 70-75%. So,
and yesterday, what were the staffing levels like?
Well, we rostered appropriately for the number of passengers we were expecting, but we had a number of staff absences on the day. So that meant we couldn't open as many lanes as we wanted very early in the morning, and that set us back for the rest of the day. Once you fall back very early in the morning, it's very hard to rectify because you have a flow of passengers all day long. People were seeing on social media that things were taking longer, so they started to arrive earlier, and you saw the queues outside. It was really disappointing for us as a team. We let our passengers down. We're sorry for that, and we're fully focused now on making sure that it doesn't happen again.
Graeme, you've been told, the DAA has been told to report back tomorrow morning on solutions ahead of the bank holiday weekend. We know it's going to be incredibly busy again at the airport. How do you propose avoiding a repeat of what we saw yesterday and indeed Saturday?
Yeah, well, look, we're working very closely with the government to make sure we've got plans not just for this weekend, but for the weeks to come. So things we're looking at, number one is roster. We've got to make sure that we've got enough people on security to get the level of passengers coming through. We know how many's coming in this weekend. It's going to be about 100,000 a day flying through the airport. That's about 50,000 departing every single day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday. So we've got to be prepared for that. So we've got to get our staffing levels at the right levels, and that's what we'll be working on.
How do you propose on doing that? So we heard today from the DAA, we heard from yourselves, it's running to the max of staffing. How are you going to fill the gap? How are you going to go beyond the max you already have?
Well, the way we've been getting through the last 2 months is we've been complementing our security team with a staff task force. We've got about 600 office workers within DAA. We're coming in, like myself, doing 4-hour shifts in the terminal, supporting those security workers. So we're calling on them again this weekend to come in and help us. There'll be other solutions as well. We're going to look very closely at the queue and make sure that that's better as well.
And so are they all vetted? I mean, one of the big issues were in recruiting staff, you said, was the clearance you have to go through, all the security clearance for what is a very responsible, high-stakes kind of a job. So are the people who are coming in vetted in a similar way? Are they ready to go?
Everyone who works for DAA has to be vetted. I have a badge myself. I'm vetted to go airside. So that means that I can work on security, not doing the x-rays and the patting down of passengers, but I can go in and I can pack the trays and things like that. So
part of the proposals are that you and others like you would be in working this weekend.
That's what we do.
That's the plan.
That's what we've been doing for the last 10 weeks.
It's a pretty desperate situation,
well, it's been working
isn't it?
very well, Claire. You look through April.
But it's not in your job brief. Do you understand that? So security workers, there's 600, I think, working here at the moment. But you've got to get a number of others, hundreds more, through training.
Claire, this has been happening through April and May. That's why we had the success that we did. We got 98% of passengers in April and the first 3 weeks of May up until last weekend, 98% through in less than 45 minutes. That was because of our staff task force working with our security staff, and that's what we're going to need this weekend.
It's been suggested that the Army be brought in. Now, that was dismissed last time out in March when we had a similar issue. Will it be considered? Is it on the table?
We're looking at all options, but what I would say is we've got our own Army deployed for the last 2 months and it's been working very well. It didn't work quite right at the weekend. We're going to look at why that was the case, but our own Army is capable of taking care of business this weekend.
Okay, wasn't capable of doing it yesterday though?
We fell down yesterday. We're taking the learnings from that and we're going to make sure that we correct that in the days and weeks to come.
Are you ruling out potentially bringing the Army in this weekend?
As it stands, we don't need the Army because the Army would be coming in to do the same job as the staff task force. They wouldn't be able to x-ray, they wouldn't be able to pat people down. They don't have the clearance for that. So for the moment, we don't need the Army and that remains the case.
Are you sorry now that you let 1,000 people go under a severance package?
Look, I think in hindsight, it's easy to say that. The fact was we had a decision to make as a business during COVID, like many businesses all around the country. We made the decision to let staff go. We're now in a mass recruitment phase. We're going to hire almost 400 new security staff by the end of June. Over half of them are in place already, and the rest will be coming in the coming weeks.
People look at levels of absenteeism and the fact that people are calling in a couple of hours due before to take their shift. They may say, well, maybe those workers aren't happy in the job. We know that you're recruiting at a rate of €14 per hour, and that many of the contracts are 20-hour contracts, but you require those staff to be available for 40 hours. Isn't this part of the problem? We
have around 600, 700 security staff with us for a long time. A lot of those workers, they're good jobs. We saw that from the job ads, from all the talk about them being bad jobs and bad contracts. We've had over 5,000 applications for those jobs. That's why we've been able to fill the pipeline with candidates very, very quickly. The problem we have is that those staff coming in, they need 5, 6, 7 weeks of training. They need clearance. All that takes time. So from where we were in February, it's taken time for us to get them on board, but they absolutely are coming. Okay, there we'll have to leave it. My thanks to you, Graeme Mulqueen, for joining us on the programme tonight. As we heard there, those proposals will be put to the Department of Transport mid-morning tomorrow, and we'll see what comes of that. Ciara.
Thanks to Claire there. Kieran O'Donnell, I'm listening to Graeme Mulqueen. There are a number of things he was talking about, but basically staff seems to be the major issue here. 1,000 let go during COVID. I know that obviously wasn't the government's decision, but the Department of Transport had to sign off on the redundancy package. Should the department not have had more concerns about 1,000 staff leaving from one of the most important pieces of infrastructure on an island like Ireland?
The government don't run the airport. The do. The government obviously would appoint a board, but the decisions from a very, very highly paid management, they make the decisions. That's what they're paid to do. They let 284 security checkers go out of that 1,000. They've been recruiting for the last 8 months since October. They know the situation, the chronic situation that was unfolding since March. So it's a terrible indictment on management. We're at a situation today where it looks like...
There was no alarm bells, though, being run in the Department of Transport.
No, and we would have, as a committee, would have written to them last Wednesday. We got a letter back from them late on Friday. No alarm bells. Basically, everything was in hand. We saw reports in the media the following day where they said they were bringing it down to looking to get to 30 minutes waiting times. So, the GA are coming in before us on Wednesday, in before the Transport Committee. They have to come forward with solutions as to how...
but I suppose, sorry to cut across you, I'm just conscious that we need to look at how we got to this place.
We got to this place because
1,000 staff are let go.
In essence, 284 security staff within there were the key. But the point I'm making is, even with that happening, and it shouldn't have happened, that was the decision of management, very well paid management. They had 8 months to recruit staff to get to a point where we are today. So there's no excuses. The situation that unfolded yesterday it's clear. They didn't have enough staff on, they didn't have enough lanes open. They should have how they would have known for certainly the previous 2 weeks, the number of passengers, the number of airplanes that were coming in.
They clearly don't have enough staff anyhow if they were relying on office workers and their media relations manager to come in and give a hand on busy weekends.
They came forward last, on the 28th of March, there was serious problems. There was people missed flights. They put contingency measures in place, and over the Easter weekend, they managed 50,000 passengers going through with no great particular difficulty. This thing came out of nowhere. But clearly, when you see the numbers going through, anyone with any semblance of knowledge would know that what unfolded yesterday was going to happen.
Louise, Dublin Airport Authority have said, look, we've had a huge recruitment campaign. There have been questions asked about what's on offer, but they say they've had 5,000 applications for positions there. They've interviewed 500 people. It is in train. It is coming. It's just taking longer, perhaps, than people would like.
So they let 1,000 people go from Dublin Airport, a vital piece of infrastructure, as you pointed out yourself. And that redundancy package was signed off by government. So it's not simply a case the government can stand back and, as they like to do with many things, they can blame somebody else. They do have a role.
The experts are the DA.
Okay, so this is probably going to continue for the whole evening. If you don't mind, please don't interrupt me, Kieran. They signed off on those redundancies. They were warned actually by the unions at the time that there would be queues out to the car park. Those were the exact words that were used by Jerry Brennan from Zip2. He said there will be queues out to the car park, and that's in fact what has happened. I would question how a redundancy situation exists, in fact, if the job is going to be required, because as we all know, it's not the person that gets made redundant, it's the role. So those roles are required. And when Mr. McQueen, who does a very able job representing Dublin Airport, but what he refers to as this task force, okay, that's people who already have full-time jobs in Dublin Airport are being asked to come in and do extra time. So they didn't have a contingency plan in place. That was the problem. People are always going to ring in sick. That is the nature of work. You have to have a contingency plan. There was no contingency plan. 1,000 people missed their flights. Those people are out of pocket. Some of them have had to cancel their holidays. How are they going to get their annual leave back? These are all questions that need to be answered. And we also need to know what was said to the junior minister when she went to the meeting with Dublin Airport last Thursday. They were certainly able to pull the wool over her eyes, or she wasn't asking the right questions.
The ministers basically said that the DA said they had everything in hand. And my main concern at the moment is we are now 3 or 4 days away from June Bank Holiday weekend. 100,000 passengers going through per day. The DA need to put a plan in place, whatever form that takes, to ensure, and whatever resources are required to make sure people can get their flights.
Eoghan Corry, 2 things. Is this happening in other airports?
Absolutely. It's happening right across Europe. The Airport Councils International have identified that bringing staff in and recruiting staff for security jobs has been a huge problem. A lot of airports scaled down during COVID. They've also identified passenger behaviour. We're not as adept at packing as we used to be. They've also identified the fact that there's peaking of flights by the airlines in smaller clusters. It's putting security under pressure, all of them under pressure. But Dublin was pretty spectacular yesterday. All of them are at the edge of being, something swinging them over and pushing them over the edge, as happened with Dublin on Sunday. What happened was quite predictable. We had the issue of the enhanced vetting came up last September, and everybody had to deal with it. The airlines had to deal with it. DA seemed to have been slower dealing with that. So in many, many ways, while, when they were that close to the edge, 17 absentees drove them over, every single part of the airport has been under the same pressures. It really needn't have happened on Sunday.
Yeah, and the worrying thing is, Eoghan, as we were saying, we're coming on to the June Bank Holiday weekend and the start of the real summer season for a lot of people, June, July and August. And we haven't reached the peak yet, have we?
Not at all. June 24 will be the peak in terms of the passengers going through. The busiest day in Dublin Airport history is 118,000 in 2019. So we're going to be close to that. Now, the Dublin Airport say yesterday was a bit of an anomaly. It didn't happen. But there are other issues. Some of the airlines are facing the same issue. Check-in desks is a problem. We have a tour operator that has people stranded in 11 countries tonight that operates with a good substantial number of Irish customers. It's a big, big problem that is not just about the security queue in Dublin Airport, that internationally the industry has to sit down and different governments. And we also have to look at, for instance, here's a solution for the morning. Those 248 people who were given redundancy are statute barred or under the terms of a redundancy package, not allowed to be rehired. If some sort of temporary stay could be put in to bring people in temporarily over the coming weeks, that would be the first step on the solution.
You're nodding your head there. You think that's a good idea?
That's what's required. We are where we are, right? The DA, and I agree with Eoghan, the DA this thing should have been resolved in terms of recruitment months ago. They've had 8 months to put this in place. What we need now is to bring staff, experienced staff back, be it on a temporary basis, to ensure we can get over the cliff edge of next weekend, and then the plans they're going to put in place for the rest of the summer. If you have 50,000 passengers going through over the weekend per day, it's going to be 100,000, maybe peak at 120,000. It'll be chaos. And this is ultimately about management. And the spokesman on there from DA talks a good line, but ultimately, the DA itself in Dublin Airport messed up his management yesterday.
Is there a real difficulty here, Daniel? Because Minister Norton did get reassurances, didn't she, last Thursday, that everything was okay. So how can we trust the next set of assurances?
We probably can't until, the proof will be in the delivery. And I suppose, this weekend will be a critical test for the airport. And I think as well, it reflects somewhat badly on Hildegard Naughton as well. That she has gone and had these daily meetings. We're hearing about these meetings all the time. What are they meeting about? If this thing could still happen, what are they actually being told? What are the Dublin Airport Authority actually telling government?
Yeah, Kieran.
Minister Hildegard Naughton has met with the DA repeatedly. The DA are charged with managing their professionals. They're highly paid.
So is she getting the wrong information then?
Certainly.
We're not asking the right question.
No, certainly. When you look at it, right, the DA clearly, in terms, and Eoghan is speaking about, in terms of the mix and the way the passengers came, particularly Sunday morning, they were not prepared.
Should the army be brought in, do you think, Louise? And why has that been, written off the table?
Well, I think that support should be put in place if they're needed. And I think that they need to work with the Dublin Airport Authority on that. But we can't get away from the fact that, and Kieran can commentate away there, but we can't get away from the fact that the government signed off on that redundancy package without knowing what the contingency arrangement was going to be. So the fact that what happened on Sunday morning, and it does reflect on us badly, not nationally and internationally, of course it does, but more than that, we need to know that we have that connectivity. We need to know that connectivity is going to be there and going to be reliable. And the only way to do it is to ensure that the airport is properly staffed. Okay, and you won't properly staff an airport or anything else by allowing people to go when the jobs are there for them to do.
But in fairness, they were saying that they were losing €1 million a day. That's what Dublin Airport Authority were saying, Louise.
But
they were a business under
pressure.
But
they were subsidised as well. So, the subsidies were there should they need them. But the difficulty was that they were people were let go. And on the back of that now, we're seeing
contingency was very simple. They've had 8 months to recruit the staff. If you look at businesses out there,
all right.
Even with Garda
And
clearance,
a meeting a week with your minister.
They get that number in place in a number of weeks.
Compensation is obviously a huge issue for those people who were left stranded yesterday. What compensation is going to be on offer? Do we know one?
Absolutely nothing is clear on this, because while there's very clear regulation, EU regulation on what airlines are responsible for, there is nothing what airports are responsible for. We have a statement by Dublin Air, verbal statement, the old joke, a verbal statement isn't worth the paper it's written on. It'll actually come down to the claims, the coming in, the receipts for hotels. And the biggest problem is going to be there is no way of ticketing people into the queue. Were you there 2.5 hours in advance? Or were you there 3.5 hours? This is not just a simple, we're going to compensate people. If you're running a coffee shop or a cruise ship, you're in the services business, Dublin Airport really has to be delivering a service that keeps that trust. And that trust has been broken yesterday, that people will show up 2.5 hours in advance and get on their flight. It's going to take them a little while to get that back.
We're going to have to leave it there. My thanks to